Hezekiah was considered a good king. Chapter 18 outlines some of the things that Hezekiah did, why he's considered such a good king. And I'm just going to look at verses 1 to 5, and then we can move on. Verse 1 says, Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father did. Verse 4, He removed the high places, and brake the images, and cut down the groves, and brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. So here's Hezekiah. Now look at what's interesting here. In verse 4, it says he removed the high places. And if you remember, from way back in Ahab's time, when Elijah confronted Ahab and the prophets of Baal, Ahab's wife Jezebel had kind of influenced Ahab, the king of Israel, so that Baal worship was coming in and being established in Israel. And although Elijah had cut down those altars of Baal and had slaughtered 400 of the prophets of Baal, here we have now Hezekiah's time. The high places are there, images are there, the groves are there, all these things that are unto false gods in Israel. So in the nation of Israel, over the years since Ahab, it didn't just get stamped out. It remained. It remained in Israel and continued to be an influence. And so Hezekiah the king, now all the other kings in between had obviously either tolerated it or participated in it. Perhaps they saw nothing wrong with it. You know, it is so easy to go with the flow. It is so easy to just overlook some things that don't seem totally right, but you can make a little excuse. Well, it's not so bad, so let's let it go on, you know. There are a lot of people who will tell you these days, oh, well, we're worshiping the same God, so let's ignore this and let's ignore that. And let people, you know, they talk about love. They use love as an excuse. Let's just love one another. Of course we ought to love one another. But loving one another does not mean that we should dishonor and disrespect God. And we cannot be brothers and sisters with people who are dishonoring God. And that is something that is very present in our society today. The people talking about love the most are the ones who are dishonoring God the most. And they tell you to just ignore that because you must learn to love. And so Hezekiah did this. But here is something else. It says he brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. Now remember, when the plague came upon Israel as they were traveling through the wilderness, God said, make a serpent out of brass and put it upon a pole, and when the people look upon it, they will be healed. And it happened. God told Moses to make the serpent and put it up, and he told the people to look at it, and once they looked at it, they would be healed of their plague. And it happened. So this serpent was obviously something that God had instructed them to do. And through it, now there was nothing in the serpent. It was a brass serpent. It was dead, lifeless. But God gives life through anything that he chooses to give life through. And so God said, look at the serpent and you will live. And they lived. It wasn't the serpent that had the power. It was the power of God being transmitted to people who acted in faith. But here, hundreds of years later, people were still looking to the serpent, because verse 4 says, unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it. Now, it was God who had set up this thing. And you might say, okay, God set it up, so it has to be good. But it had served its purpose. Its purpose was finished, and they should have been done away with it long ago. But they were justifying themselves because it was God who had established it. This had become an object of idolatry. So many times we find that Christians today, churches today, will tell you it was God who did this. It was God who gave our church this name. It was God who led this and God who led that. God may use anything to accomplish his purpose, but that thing is not the object of worship. And they had made this serpent into an object of worship, and Hezekiah destroyed it. So Hezekiah had a good understanding of what God wanted, and Hezekiah was willing to do what God wanted. So he was a good king. He was zealous for the Lord. But in the midst of life, there comes death, even to good people, and we have to face that reality. Death is certain, even to good people. And I'm going to go to chapter 20 of 1 Kings. And picking up at verse 1, it says, in those days, so after Hezekiah had done all these things, he had reigned for a little while, and he had brought back Israel. If you read the rest of chapter 18, it tells you some of the other things Hezekiah did. I just wanted to highlight that serpent thing. I just wanted us to understand that it doesn't matter who set up what. It doesn't matter if God did it. God works through things to glorify himself, but the thing, the object, is not the object of worship. Worship God. Worship God. So Hezekiah did all that, but then he got sick. Chapter 20 verse 1 says, in those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And the prophet Isaiah, so Isaiah was contemporaneous with Hezekiah. He was a prophet at that time. Isaiah the son of Amos came to him and said unto him, thus saith the Lord, set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. None of us wants to hear that message. If the doctors say you are a stage 4 cancer, you're going to die, it's not a good message. It's not good news. We don't want to hear it. But God sent Isaiah to tell Hezekiah, you're going to die. Set things in order. Do what you have to do. You want to write a will, write a will. You want to tell who is going to do this, who's going to do that. You want to decide what you're going to do with your possessions. Put everything in order, because you're going to die. In verse 2 it says, Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. Hezekiah did not want to die. He wept, and he was recounting to God, I have done these things for you. I have worked in your service. I have walked before thee in truth with a perfect heart. I don't want to die. That's natural. That's human. You know, God is always merciful, and God is always ready and willing to hear our pleas. In verse 2, it says, it came to pass before Isaiah was gone out into the middle court, that the word of the Lord came to him, saying, turn again, and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee. God has a heart. God has a heart, and God responds to our requests and our needs. And it must have touched God's heart to see this big man crying. I don't want to die. And God said, I will heal thee. On the third day, thou shalt go up unto the house of the Lord. And I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. And Isaiah said, take a lump of figs. And they took it and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. He had a boil. And Isaiah took a lump, made a little poultice out of figs, and he put it on the boil, and he was healed. Verse 8, Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, what shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I shall go up into the house of the Lord the third day? Hezekiah wanted a sign from God. Hezekiah heard Isaiah. Now, it's funny that when Isaiah said to him, you're going to die, he didn't ask for a sign. I guess he had the sign, he had the sickness, and he could tell. Now he wants a sign that what Isaiah is saying to him is true. And Isaiah said, this sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he has spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or go back 10 degrees? Now, you know, in those days they used a sundial. It had a little stick, a little piece standing up, and as the sun passed over, the shadow would move on the sundial. And he said, shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or go back 10 degrees? What do you want? You pick your sign. Either that the shadow moves forward 10 degrees or back 10 degrees. Hezekiah said, it's a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. It's natural. That's the direction it is going. The sun is moving in that direction, so the shadow is going to go down. But let the shadow turn back 10 degrees. Now that is going to show that it is God, because only God can do that. And there can be no doubt when you see it go in a way that it would not naturally go. So Isaiah the prophet cried unto the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backward, by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. So God responded to Hezekiah. Brothers and sisters, I want us to understand that God hears us, and God will respond to us. And it's not just always on a matter of it has to be this way or that way. God yields to the desires of our hearts, because his heart is a heart of love, and he wants his people to be happy. And when Hezekiah cried out to God, God heard him, and God responded, and even went as far as showing him the sign by turning back. You know what that meant? It meant that time reversed. Joshua prayed when he was at war. He wanted to be able to get rid of all the enemy, and he said, let the sun stand still, and God made the sun stand still. But Hezekiah asked for the sun to go backwards. And 10 degrees would be almost an hour, about 40-45 minutes backwards. Not a whole lot of time when you count it on the day, but it went backwards. And it's not, let me tell you, perhaps for Hezekiah and for those people that days, and for Joshua, the sun standing still might just look, an object in the sky and it stands still. Or the sun going back 10 degrees, it's an object in the sky and it goes back 10 degrees. But today, when we understand how the world and nature and science works, we have to recognize that it was a marvelous, miraculous feat for the sun to go back 10 degrees. Because the earth is rotating. And because of that rotation, things are in place, things remain in place. Gravity keeps things in place. For the sun to go back 10 degrees, the earth would have had to come to a stop in its spinning, nothing move, and then reverse the direction for the sun to go back 10 degrees. And God had to, in all of that, keep everything in place. It was not a small thing. It was not a small thing for the sun to go back 10 degrees, for the shadow of the sundial to reverse. But God did it for Hezekiah. He'll do it again for you. Sometimes when God blesses us, what a blessing. What a marvelous thing God did for Hezekiah. Brothers and sisters, how do you feel? You know, I've had similar experience. I've told you all about when God made the lime tree blossom for me, when God made my yard fill up with birds for me, you know, to show me a sign. God will do it. I'm not talking about Hezekiah now. I'm talking about me. I have seen it in my own lifetime. So I can testify to the fact that the same God who did it for Hezekiah is ready, willing, and able to do it for us if we'll only trust him. And I challenge you to put God to the test, not to test him and prove him, but to test you and prove you. To prove your faith, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. 2 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 5. Examine yourself. Know if your faith and confidence in God is steadfast. Do you believe he will do it? Do you trust him to do it? And will you accept when he does it? That's the thing, you know. The most important thing is for you to be ready, willing, and able to accept what God does in your life. Sometimes when God blesses us, we think it's all about me. I'm so special. Look at what God has done for me. I'm a better Christian than you people because God has done this for me. We get puffed up and we feel, you know, and that's why sometimes God is not able to use us and to do things for us and through us, because he's trying to protect us from that. He's trying to protect you from getting too much into yourself and getting into self-worship and self-righteousness. So sometimes he can't do it. So sometimes he does a little bit, just a little bit, for you to just have the confidence, just have the faith. And then when you are faithful in the small things, he will make you ruler over many. Hezekiah, a great king. God did this for him. And sometimes when God does things for us, as I said, we become puffed up. You can well imagine that the sun didn't go back 10 degrees just for Hezekiah or just for Israel. God is dealing with a world. God is dealing with a solar system. God is dealing with a universe. And for the sun to go back 10 degrees on Earth, all the other planets in the solar system, all the other solar systems, all the other galaxies, everything had to be held in perfect harmony for that to take place. Otherwise, things would fly off into space and everything would become a big wreck if God didn't do that. And so you can imagine that other people on the earth saw something happen. And so verse 12 says, at that time, Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. So this man from Babylon sent a letter. He heard that Hezekiah had been sick. I wonder how he heard. People get sick every day and nobody don't go around proclaiming, oh, this man is sick and that man is sick. I wonder how he heard. I suspect, though the Bible doesn't tell me, but I suspect that he also noticed that the sun had gone back 10 degrees. I suspect that other people in other nations would have noticed that the sun had gone back 10 degrees. It's not a normal thing to happen. So people would have been amazed and they would have been making inquiries. What happened? How did the sun go back 10 degrees? And little by little the news must have traveled. Because, you know, people talk. And everybody heard eventually that God made the sun go back 10 degrees for the king of Israel. That he was sick and he asked God to heal him, and God gave him the sign of the sun going back 10 degrees. Well, who wouldn't want to meet this man? Who wouldn't want to meet a man who God responds to like that? And so the king of Babylon sent a present and sent letters. He wants to friend him up now, to become a friend of this man who the gods respond to, who the gods would make the sun go backward for. He wants to become a friend of his. You know who Babylon was. You know what Babylon was. Babylon was a city that sprung up right after Nimrod and his Tower of Babel was destroyed by God. Nimrod and the people there built a tower that in defiance of God. They're saying, if God ever try again to destroy the world by flood, we are going to be safe. We're going to make sure that that flood cannot reach us. So we're building a tower. You see, from way back then, people are trying to find their own salvation. Instead of just becoming a friend of God and say, God, bring all the flood you want, but I'm going to be safe because I am hid in you. They say, no, we're going to make our own safety, our own protection. They built a tower. And we know the story. God destroyed that tower and scattered them abroad. But they built a city there, and the city was Babylon. And we know Babylon has been in defiance against God over the generations coming down. And so Hezekiah would have known that Babylon was not a friend of God. But presents have a way of softening people's hearts. Send a gift, send a present to him. Show him that we mean him well. We want to be friends. And verse 13 says, Hezekiah hearkened unto them and showed them. So they came, they visited, and Hezekiah showed them all the house of his precious things. You know, when you get a visitor, the tradition over the years has been, you show them around your house. Oh, this is my living room, this is my kitchen, this is my bathroom, this is my bedroom. You know, make people feel at home. You welcome them into your home and you show them around the house. Hezekiah was being a good host, showing the Babylonian people the place. He showed them all the silver, the gold, the spices, precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Nor in all his dominion, it says. Hezekiah had in his dominion the temple of God. In that temple was the Ark of the Covenant. Hezekiah took these heathen people into the temple of God and showed them God's precious Ark of the Covenant, containing Aaron's rod that budded, the pot of manna, the 2 tables of stone. Hezekiah had respect for the persons who thought him to be such a big thing that they wanted to be his friend. They sent gifts to him, and Hezekiah suddenly felt that he was Mr. Big, he was Mr. Important, and he wanted to show these people how important and how big he was. And so he showed them all the treasures. Man, I'm wealthy. Man, I've got it all. This is what God has done for us, and we are a mighty people. Brothers and sisters, it is a lesson for us to be cautious. When God does things for you, always recognize that it is God and not you. If you get a bachelor's degree, it's God who has helped you and permitted you to get there. You get a master's, you get a doctorate, whatever you get. If you get a small house or you get a big house, if you are able to buy a nice car or a not so nice car, whatever it is, if you get a good job and you're making a lot of money, do not think it is you. You must recognize that it is God who is the source of your strength, the source of your intellect, the source of your health. Whatever it is, you're a healthy person, you're strong and you're muscular if you're a man, or you got a nice body if you're a woman, nice face, good hair, whatever it is you have, it is God. You're tall, dark and handsome, whatever it is, you have to recognize and give God thanks and don't show off with it. That is the point. Hezekiah was showing off with these things which did not even belong to him, because they were all the possession of God. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto him, King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. And Isaiah said, What have they seen in thine house? What have you shown them? Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. He was honest. He had shown them everything. And you know, I don't want you to be too critical or condemnatory of Hezekiah here. He wasn't thinking that he was doing something wrong. But I want you to understand what overtook him. What overtook him was that God had blessed him, had favored him, and he thought it was because of him. So he became puffed up. He began to think too much of himself. And when we think too much of ourselves, when we become puffed up, we can make some terrible mistakes. When we're making them, we don't realize what we are doing many times. It's not like Hezekiah thought, oh well, these are God's things, but I'm gonna just show off with them. He probably didn't think about it. It was a big mistake that he made. And brothers and sisters, we have to know that we have to guard well against self, because the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? You don't know your own heart. You don't know where it's going to take you. You don't understand how easy it is to slip away from God. Hezekiah said, They have seen everything. I didn't hide anything from them. I showed them everything, all the treasures. Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day, shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Sometimes our mistakes don't only affect us. The third commandment said, I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. It's not that God necessarily does something to the second and third and fourth generation, but the actions of the fathers, the actions of the parents can influence and affect your children and your grandchildren and even your great-grandchildren, the third and fourth generation. Now, think about this. We know that a few generations later, Nebuchadnezzar invaded Jerusalem and he took all the treasures that were in Jerusalem, took out all the vessels of the temple and carried them away to Babylon, and he captured a lot of people. That's how Daniel ended up in Babylon. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and a lot of young people. Now, perhaps, the Bible doesn't say it, and I can't, but perhaps because of Hezekiah having shown the king of Babylon all the treasures of Israel, that information passed down from one king to the next king to the next king, so that by the time it came to Nebuchadnezzar, that knowledge was there that Israel had good treasures in their temple. And so when Nebuchadnezzar was conquering the world, of course Jerusalem would have been somewhere he would go. And of course those precious vessels, it got so bad that when those precious vessels were taken into Babylon and they became the property of Babylon, that later on, when Belshazzar had his feast, he took one of those vessels that had been captured and taken to Babylon. He took one of those vessels and was drinking wine from it. And that's when the handwriting came on the wall. the consequences of our actions do not always stop with us. They go down the line. When they were captured, Nebuchadnezzar had the eyes of Jehoiakim put out, stuck hot iron into his eyes to blind him, because there was some rebellion. They were resisting, and they took them to Babylon as captives. What have they seen in thy house? What are you showing to people of God? I suppose if Hezekiah had said, if Hezekiah had taken them and said, I had a sickness, and I prayed to God, and my God healed me. They put a poultice of figs on my boils, and God healed me. The secret to my healing, the secret to the sun going backward, is the fact that I serve a mighty God. Maybe the people of Babylon would have turned to the worship of God. But instead he showed them gold and silver and precious things, and that's what they desired. What do you manifest to people as your blessing? Many times, many Christians today, you have these people with the prosperity doctrine. They don't feel they are blessed unless they get money. They don't feel they are blessed. God bless me tonight. And the preachers who preach to put a seed offering or seed tithe or whatever they call it. You put in $10, you put in $100, you put in $1,000, and God will bless you, and you're expecting tenfold and 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold. So you expect a lot of money. And they teach you to bring your tithes into the storehouse, and God will bless you. And the blessing is that you will get more money. You will get richer. That's the blessing that Christendom today teaches us about. And so the people who don't have money, the people who don't have a house and don't have a car, and they have to be walking on the road, they're not blessed. They're not blessed of God. But the true blessing is that you're a child of God. The true blessing is that you show people what the Lord has done for you spiritually. Let people know the true source of the blessing. And as the Bible says, if riches increase, set not your heart on it. Today we are living in the age when the Spirit of God is abundantly available for all men. God didn't give His Spirit just for some. The Spirit is available for everybody. For those murderers out there, for the thieves, for the liars, for the homosexuals. God's Spirit is available for all of them. But God's people are not offering the Spirit. God's people are looking to these people for blessings. We are looking to them to provide for us money, food, clothing, shelter. Because our minds are fixed too much in the material things. Our minds are fixed too much on physical blessings. And so the spiritual blessings, when God pours them upon us, we're not grateful. Or you say, thanks God, but it's not that I really need. Can I get this too? Can I get some of that? Can I get some more money? Because I don't have any money, so I need some money. Oh, but God has given you food. God has given you clothing. God has given you shelter. So what do you need money for? Well, I'd like to buy something else that I didn't get. Or I'd like to have some money so that if I need something, I can go and buy it. Oh, so you don't think God can give you that something that you need when you get it? And you don't think that if you don't even get it, the blessing of the Spirit of God in you is enough? He said to Paul, my grace is sufficient for thee. Brothers and sisters, the grace of God is sufficient for us. And the question I want to leave us with is the same question that Isaiah asked Hezekiah again. What have they seen in thine house? What does the world see in your house? Let's give them Jesus.